Welcome to the third devlog of my game, The Adventures of Bob. I've made some big changes in my game. I've worked on the graphics and added enemies. But before I show everything I've been working on, I'd like to thank all the people who've watched my first two videos and left so many suggestions for my game. I've seen a lot of great ideas. Thank you for your support. The first thing I want to work on is the transparency of the buildings. If the player moves behind the building, part of it becomes semi-transparent. That doesn't work really well. Here's a quick test of how it will look if all the tiles in the building become transparent. As you can see, that doesn't work either. Because of how I built the screen, the tiles overlap. If you put all the semi-transparent cubes on top of each other, it becomes this blurry but solid thing. Another idea would be to draw only the outline of the building. That's actually quite difficult to do. I want to be able to create all kinds of buildings and structures, maybe on the fly. That eliminates the possibility to pre-draw outlines for every structure. I haven't thought of a quick solution yet. Instead, I will make the building disappear and put some crosses on the floor to indicate that you can't walk there. I had to change the underlying structure of the map a bit to store to which building every tile belongs. And I could reuse the obscured map that I've made for the previous episode. That map was used to prevent candy being placed behind the building. Now I can use it for when the player steps on an obscure tile. It signals the map to not draw that building. This isn't the most pretty looking solution, but it works really well and it wasn't hard to do. I've also added this trick to the mouse. Now it's time to make the game more interesting. The candy collecting isn't much of a challenge, although I've gotten some smart suggestions from viewers that I may implement later. But I want to add some obstacles in the form of enemies. So I've changed the candy into monsters. I don't want to move too much from the original gameplay, that's why I've kept a limited amount of moves for the player. This will change the game into a turn-based adventure or RPG. I'm guessing that most RPGs nowadays are real-time or action games, but I personally really like turn-based games. Action games are actually easier to make. You just let every character in the game do its own thing. Turn-based is a little trickier. Everybody has to wait for its turn and you need to keep track of all the characters and their turns. And you don't want to keep the player waiting for too long when the enemies are doing their evil thing. That's why the enemies move together. Attacks will be separate though. When you're being attacked, you'd like to see what is going on. For the attack to work, I have to make some changes to my engine again. The map was an array which held the names of the sprites in each position. Now I've added the possibility to add the number of the character instead of the sprite. That way it's easy to find the character on every tile. Let's add health and death to the characters. We have a new winning and losing system. There's a vital feature missing and that's feedback. It's hard to tell what's going on. The attacks happen, but you can only see the result in a decreasing number or disappearing monsters. Let's fix that. We need some animation. For now, I'll use simple movement. I don't know how to draw fancy animations. Here I've added a sign function to the position of the player just to see how that looks. I think I can make that work. The enemies can hop too, but I'll have to fix the shadow. I want the movement to be more gradual. Right now, the characters move from tile to tile in one step. I want that to look smoother. I need an extra variable to store how far the character has moved from one tile to the next. And I have to be careful not to mess up the depth layering. That looks much better. Now let's try to combine the sliding and hopping. I think that looks really great. It's so much fun to see them hopping around. Everybody's doing the bop hop. Wait a minute.
Everybody do the bop hop. Everybody do the bop hop. Square around if you hear this sound. You gotta get up and do the bop hop. Cause everybody likes the bop hop. Everybody does the bop hop.
Now let's add a hop to the attack. A big improvement. It can use some more effects like particles, but I'll leave that for another day. I'm getting bored with the level. The tileset needs an update. Bob's World could use some trees. Here's a tree, but it's much too big and bulky. It blocks a huge part of the screen. I will make a smaller one. And while I'm working on the sprites, I get the feeling that I need to work on the color palette. It's not consistent. I need to limit the number of colors and I need them to be more cohesive. I've learned a lot about palettes. For me, it's still hard to make a limited palette. Since the tiles are cubes and have at least 3 shades, the number of colors increase rapidly. It's also because of the way how I store the sprite. They're all separate files which I import in my game. If I change the color in my palette, I need to check with all the files to see if the sprite contains that color and needs to be updated. I have to change that. I will create one big sprite sheet, do all the color corrections on that and import it to the game. Instead of drawing separate sprites, I'll draw parts of the sprite sheet. Oops. The premise of the series is to never break the game. Let's fix that and pretend that has never happened. I feel like the graphics have improved a lot. I will continue to work on them, but I'm pleased with the results so far. As you can see, I've added potions to heal your wounds and small trees for some variety. If you're curious to see where this game is heading, you might consider subscribing to my channel. See you in the next devlog.